Okay, so we are solving radical equations. This is the last notes, and it also has a little bit of factoring. Luckily, it doesn't take it all the way to the box, which is good, but it does have a little bit of factoring. So just a reminder, when you don't have to do the box, that's when A is 1, yes? Yes. So you have A times C on top and B on bottom, and it's what multiplies to give you the top and adds to give you the bottom. And if you want to use the calculator trick, remember y1, it's your top number divided by x. Top number divided by x plus x. And then remember, you go to your table and you look for your b and y2, and it's these numbers go here. Yes? Okay. So that's our little refresher. Okay, so we are solving radical equations. Your steps for solving radicals is to isolate your radical, make the radical go away, and then if there's still radicals, you go back to step 1. If there's not, you solve and check your work. You do have to check your work because sometimes it doesn't work. Yes? Okay, so knowing that, if we look at example 1, is my radical isolated? Is my radical alone on one side of the equal sign? Yeah. And how do you make that radical go away? How do you get rid of a cube root? You cube it. So if I cube the left side of the equal sign, as long as I cube the right side of the equal sign, it's still equal, right? So my cube root cancels my cube, and I'm left with 4x minus 1 equals, well, what's 3 cubed? No, 27. Now what? Well, it says, are the radicals gone? So yes. Therefore, go to step 4, solve and check. So how do I solve this? Plus 1. And I get 4x equals 28. Now what? And x equals what? And before I check it, before I box it and say that's my answer, I'm going to go to my calculator, and if you need a reminder, you hit math 4 for a cube root. So it is 4, always use parentheses to plug it in, 7 minus 1, and what should it equal? 3. Did it work? Yes. So this is my answer, x equals 7. So math 4 for the cube root, just a reminder. Any questions with that one? Okay, so let's look at example 2. What do we do? We're going to subtract 5. We have to get our radical alone. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. And we get the square root of 2x plus 3 equals negative 5. So our radical's alone, and we have to get rid of our radical. So how do we do that? We square both sides. So when I square both sides, I get 2x plus 3 equals what? 2 negatives makes a? So it's actually positive 25. Yes. Yeah, you have to use parentheses. Okay, so now what do I do? And I get 2x equals 22. Now what? Divide by 2. And I get x equals 11. So again, before I say that's my solution, I have to check my work. So I'm going to plug it in. So square root, I always plug it into the original before I changed anything. 2 times 11 plus 3. And on the outside of the house I have plus 5. And what do I want it to equal? Did it work? So if my one solution doesn't work, what's my answer? And just a reminder, this is your symbol for no solution. Okay, so let's look at example 3. Is my radical alone? No, so what do I need to move? How do I move that x? Subtract it. So I'm going to do minus x minus x. Now, I know it's not in order, but I'm not super worried about it yet. We can fix the order here in a second. Is my radical alone now? Yes. So what do I do to get rid of it? Square. But I have to square both sides, and I have to square the whole side. Well, on the left side, the square root cancels the squared, and I'm left with x minus 1 equals, well, squared means twice, right? So I'm going to cross off my squared, and I'm going to write it again. Because isn't that squared? Yes. How do I do that? Yes, and I have to double distribute because it's a binomial times a binomial. So 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times negative x is negative 3x. Negative x times 3, negative 3x. And then negative x times negative x, positive x squared. Now, when I rewrite this, so I still have x minus 1 on the left, I'm going to flip the order. So what should go first? X squared. And I underlined the two terms that are alike. What should come next? The like terms or the 9? The like terms, because they have x. What's negative 3x minus 3x? Minus 6x. And then this is a positive 9 or a negative 9? Positive. So now I have it in order. Now, because I have a squared, I'm going to have to factor. So when you have something squared, you have to get it set equal to 0. So I don't want to move the squared because I can't have a negative squared. I want to move everything on the opposite side. So how do I move these two terms? How do I get rid of that x? Minus x. And how do I get rid of this negative 1? And I just lined them up with their like terms on the right side. So I'm left with 0 equals x squared minus 7x plus 10. Now I can factor it. So the nice thing is a is 1. A is 1, b is negative 7, c is 10. And a reminder, a times c goes on top. What's 1 times 10? 10. And what's b? So I'm looking for what multiplies to give me 10 and adds to give me negative 7. When your top number is positive and your bottom number is negative, it's going to be a double negative. So what multiplies to give you 10 and adds to give you 7? 5 and 2. So it's going to be negative 5, negative 2. Now proper is to rewrite this as 0 equals x minus 5, x minus 2. However, you can skip that step and just write x minus 5 equals 0 and x minus 2 equals 0. Because remember, you set your factors equal to 0 and solve. So how do I solve this for x? Plus 5. And what does that give me? So on this one, plus 2, x equals 2. So again, before I box any of my answers, I have to check them. So I'm going to use my original, which is x, so 5, plus the square root of x minus 1, so 5 minus 1. There was no multiplying, so I didn't really have to use parentheses. And did that equal 3?
Yeah.
The 5.
Yes.
Did it equal 3? No.
Sorry,
No, you're good. So then the other one, 2 plus the square root of 2 minus 1, did that equal 3?
Yes.
So the 5 didn't work, but the 2 did. So x equals 2. Any questions with that?
Would we still put in like x equals 2 and then have like 5 in parentheses next to it?
No, I'm not worried about it.
Why didn't the x equals 5 work?
Because when we plugged it in, it equaled 7 and not 3. Okay, so there are 2 more on the back. Now, luckily, I was not this mean, and I didn't give you a bunch of these like this on your practice. These are not the most fun because there's a lot to it. Why do you think there's a lot to it? Well, how many radicals do you see? 3. Okay, even on number 5, there's 2, when all the other ones we've seen is 1. Okay, so it's not even bad when there's 2. Sometimes there's 2 and it's super simple, but there's also another term. So when you have more than one term or more than two terms and there's more than one radical, it can be difficult. So the secret is to get your larger radical alone. So my larger radical here is this x minus 6, okay? Because it has two terms on the inside. Well, this is a single term, right? So I got that one alone already, right? And how do I get rid of it? Square it. So I'm going to square both sides. Well, I have to square this whole side. Square root cancels the squared on the left, and I get x minus 6. However, on this side, I can't just do that. I have to double distribute it. So I'm actually going to bring it over here, and I'm going to double distribute it. So square root of 2 minus square root of x. Square root of 2 minus square root of x. And I'm going to double distribute. Well, the nice thing is everything's in a house, so everything will combine, right? Because when you multiply, under the houses can combine. So what's the square root of 2 times the square root of 2? Square root of 4. Now, square root of 2 times the negative square root of x. Well, positive times a negative is a negative. And they're both in the house, so what's 2 times x? And again, negative square root of x times the square root of 2, so negative times positive is negative. X times 2 is 2x. And the square root of x, negative square root of x times negative square root of x. Well, two negatives makes a positive, and then x times x is x squared. So what is the square root of 4? 2. Now, anytime you multiply something by itself, it's going to be a whole, like a pretty number or letter. So square root of x, square root cancels the squared, that also equals just x. So those are the simple ones. Now these, not so much. Sometimes if you get lucky multiplying something and make a pretty number, it might happen, but we didn't get that lucky this time. So remember, you combine. Well, can't we put a 1 in front? What's negative 1 minus 1? Negative 2. Do not ever tell me they cancel, okay? Two negatives will never cancel. Yes? You have to have a negative and a positive that match to cancel. So this is what that equals. So 2 minus 2 square root of 2x plus x. Now, step 3 on the first page of notes said, are there still radicals? And if there are, to start back at step 1. So we need to get this radical all alone, all over again. So I need to get rid of my addition and subtraction first. So how do I get rid of plus x? So minus x. Well, what happens to both of those? They both cancel. So that was nice. And then I have to get rid of this 2, because this one's touching, which means multiplication. We can't get rid of that one yet. How do I get rid of this positive 2? So minus 2 minus 2. And that gives me negative 8 equals. Now that negative is still there because we didn't cancel it. Now, because there's no symbol in the middle, I've been like hollering this from the rooftops, I feel like. That means it's a multiplication. How do we get rid of multiplication? Division. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 2. And what's negative 8 divided by negative 2?
4.
So we get 4 equals the square root of 2x. Now what? Well, is our radical alone? How do we get rid of the radical? We square it, because it's a square root, so square both sides. Square root cancels the squared. And we have 2x. And what's 4 squared? 16. Last step. Divide by 2. And we get x equals 8, or 8 equals x. So before I can say that's my answer, I have to check my work. But do you notice that there's an x on both sides of the equal sign? That means I have to plug it into both sides of the equal sign, yes? So we get the square root of 8 minus 6 on the left, and I get this decimal. And that's fine as long as the other side equals the same ugly decimal, yes? So the other side gets square root of 2, come out from under the house, minus the square root of x, which is 8. Now, are those exactly the same?
No.
Are those equal? No. The numbers are the same, but a positive and a negative are not equal. So this is not working, therefore it is no solution. Okay, one more. It's similar, but it has a couple different things that I want to talk about, so we're going to do it, and then you'll have time to practice today and then more time tomorrow. Okay, so look at example 5. So again, I said that we always want to get our larger radical alone first. So this is the one that's larger. So how do I get that by itself?
Minus.
Yeah, I see what y'all are saying. Minus the square root of 2x. So minus the square root of 2x on both sides. Now, is that radical alone? And I don't feel like rewriting it, so I'm just going to kind of scribble this out. Okay, and I'm going to do what to get the radical gone? Square both sides. Now I have to square this whole side like it did at the top. So on the left, it's nice and pretty. Square root cancels the square root, and we get 2x plus 5. However, on the right, just like the top, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to double distribute. Now this is why I wanted to do this one. I wanted to remind you of what happens when we multiply and we have numbers that are outside of a house, so like whole numbers, times radicals. So first things first, we have 3 times 3, which is what? 9. Now we have 3 times negative square root of 2x. Well, positive times a negative is a negative. And 3 is on the outside of a house, and square root of 2x is on the inside of the house. So we just put them together. Because you can't multiply those because one's on the outside, one's on the inside. So same concept, negative 2 square root of x times 3 is positive times a negative is a negative. One's on the inside, one's on the outside, so it's just 3 square root of 2x. And then negative square root of 2x times negative square root of 2x. 2 negatives makes a. And then 2x times 2x is 4x squared. Or you could have just said square root of 2x twice, right? Okay, so you could say that either way. You're going to get the same answer. Because here, doesn't the square root cancel the squared? Well, here, what's the square root of 4? 2. And then doesn't the square root cancel the squared, so you're left with x? So it's the same concept. Does that make sense? Now 9 stays because it's a whole number. And then in the middle, 2x doesn't simplify, 2 is prime, x doesn't have an exponent. What's negative 3 minus 3? So we have negative 6 square root of 2x. I'm trying to put words together. Making up my own words. So we have 9 minus 6 square root of 2x plus 2x. So just like before, we have to get the new radical alone. So what do I need to move?
Subtract.
So I could do minus 2x. And what happens just like before? They both zero out. What else do I need to subtract? 9. So minus 9 minus 9. And that gives me negative 4 equals negative 6 square root of 2x. Now I couldn't add the 6 because these are touching, which means multiplication. So how do I get rid of multiplication? Division. So what do I divide both sides by? Negative 6. So the negative 6 cancel. And what does this give me? Well, not a decimal. We don't want a decimal. We're going to leave it as a fraction. So it does, 2 negatives cancel and make a positive. And then if you type in your calculator, alpha y equals enter, you could even leave the negatives. It's going to give you a positive 2/3. Okay? So now what do I need to do? Square both sides. Now, don't freak out when squaring a fraction. You could do it in your calculator. Or what's 2 squared? And what's 3 squared? You just have to square the top and the bottom. That's all you got to do. However, you could have typed it in your calculator. And you get the same thing. So it will do it for you. Now what do I need to do? Divide by what? Okay, we have a fraction and we want to divide it by 2. Which, cool thing is, we get to use our calculator. We can do it in the calculator. What would you do if you didn't have a calculator? Without crying. Yes, you can multiply by 1/2. So dividing by 2 is the same thing. Multiply by 1/2, yes. So just so you'll know, if you ever need to divide by a number, but you're trying to do it by hand, you could just multiply by the reciprocal. So that's 2 over 1, which is just 1 over 2. But cool thing is we can type in the calculator. So we have alpha y equals enter 4 over 9, divide 2, and it gives me 2 over 9. So x equals 2 over 9. Now, before we box it, what do we need to do? Check it. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to look at the original. I know I kind of crossed some of it out. But I have the square root of 2. Oh, dang it. Dang it. Two over 9 plus 5, and then come out from under the house plus the square root again of 2, and then the fraction again. So alpha y equals enter 2 over 9. This one's kind of a pain in the 2D, but it is what it is. And what do we want it to equal? 3. Did it work? So there is my solution. Which makes us happy because I feel like sometimes when we get no solution, y'all are like, we really did all that for nothing. Okay, one thing I am going to do to be nice is we're going to cross off number 9, so you don't have to do the box. So you can cross off number 9. The back is actually pretty simple, so don't let the back stress you out. That's actually the easier ones. Number 5 and 6, don't let those stress you out either. Y'all, you have 0 on the other side. So if you move this over, don't you just have a radical equals a radical or a square root equals a square root? So when you square both sides, doesn't it just cancel both square roots? Yeah, and then it's just simple. You just solve the inside. So don't overthink these, yes? This one more thing. What do you think you should do first?
Minus 8.
Okay, you could do minus x. And then you have negative square root of 3x plus 18 equals negative x. Now what? You could divide both sides by negative 1, and what does that do? It just cancels the negatives. So now could you just square both sides? Yes. Okay. Also, if you square a negative, what does it become? So if you would have just squared both sides, what's a negative times a negative? A positive. So did it go away? Yes. So I have had so many people stress this one out today. Don't do that. Yes? Okay, cool. This is what you're working on. If you have questions, let me know.
Does my